I've got the deputy editor and the finance editor here of the Wall Street Journal. They've both been running around all week, gathering stories, thinking about what we need to cover right now in the moment, but also making note of the big themes that have emerged from Davos this year, which is going to help shape our coverage over the next 6 months to a year. So David and Amol, I'm going to ask both of you, what have been the big themes that have emerged for both of you? David, you start while you've been here.
Well, I think I've been to a bunch of Davoses before, and I think this is the first time that sort of the geopolitical conversation has converged with Davos. It's normally sort of dismissed as a sort of talking shop in the mountains, and nothing really happens. But actually, obviously, this year we had a huge geopolitical event. We kind of came very close to a rupture between America and Europe, and then we had the climb down over Greenland, and that has just kind of dominated the entire meeting.
Now, Amol, this is your first Davos,
This
right?
is my first, yeah.
So before you tell us about your big takeaways, tell us what your impression is of your first Davos.
The biggest theme is that if anyone feeds you, take it. That's unfortunately, no one gave me that advice before I got here. But my impression is that it's a lot smaller than I thought. I think in my mind, I thought I didn't understand that Alex Rodriguez and Steve Schwartzman and Scott Bessent were gonna, just single file walk down the street next to each other. So it's a very interesting, intimate atmosphere.
Albeit surrounded by security guards.
Yeah, and during the, I know you were inside the Trump speech, which you could talk about later, but I was just outside doing a meeting with some finance. There were some other top finance executives, pretty big names that were watching on the screen, and it was just captions. They didn't have the audio, and the whole time it was just a series of sighs. It was just guffaws and sighs, reading captions. So I thought this is a pretty bizarre experience, but it's been interesting in terms of themes. Obviously, David mentioned Greenland. I have to publicly give Anthony Scaramucci credit right now because he predicted this climb down earlier in the week, and then I was emailing with him. I'm like, I think you're wrong. Look at these tweets. And then he later saw me and said I was right. But certainly that, I think AI, there's a lot of AI, to talk about, but one theme that I came away with is it's like the answer to every problem. I mean, people think it is, it's the panacea. For example, the productivity gains of AI are supposed to be the 2026 story. But now it's like, maybe that will solve the fiscal deficit in the United States, and all. Just a lot is being put on the shoulders of this one technology for everything to pan out. So I'm coming back, sort of, the editor in me is thinking the what ifs, all the what ifs if that doesn't play out. But, yeah.
That's very interesting what you're saying about AI, because it's true. I mean, people are suggesting it's going to solve all the problems, but there is also a slight undertone of anxiety that it isn't going, that as well as solving a lot of problems, it's also going to create a lot of problems. And while there's a lot of excitement around the solving, not enough attention is being paid to the impact that AI is going to have on society. And that was something that I've heard coming up quite often from people. I don't know, David, is that what you've been hearing?
I've heard that, and I've also heard that for some of the very big companies here, some of the big banks, they are now worried that the productivity gains that they were thinking they were going to get are going to be much harder won than before. So, the big kind of sort of like opportunity for them was to kind of use AI and cut a lot of jobs. And they've started trying to do it, and it turns out it's going to be a lot harder than they thought.
That's an interesting. I mean, can you say a bit more about why?
I think it's just the integration. I mean, I don't want to give away the company that told me that, but it's a very, very big company, and it's been around for a very, very long time. And it runs on a patchwork of systems that have been built and rebuilt over many, many years. And actually taking AI and plugging it in to those systems without falling foul of regulators and so on has been much, much harder than they thought. And for them, they can sort of, there are other benefits of AI, but for them the big number was the big cost saving, and now they're worried they're not going to be able to achieve it.
So Amol, while you've been here, you've obviously been speaking to a lot of CEOs, and the CEOs at Davos come from all over the world. This is a bit of an obvious question, but have you detected a different kind of mood amongst certain groups of CEOs compared with others?
Certainly, and one thing that was off the bat was clear was the European side. And remember, the business executives are also interacting with their country delegations and the government folks. So there's a sense in some quarters of real frustration that Europe can't. There was Macron coming out forcefully, and maybe some other notes of really forceful dissent. But there's not like a unified, really strong response when Trump and Scott Bessent were really amping up the rhetoric earlier in the week. Now maybe it's resolving, we'll see, but that I detected that, and people, it had nothing to do with their business or the topic of conversation we were supposed to be talking about, something in the financial world, and that's what was on their mind, kind of. This is a very diverse, complicated block of countries. They don't agree, and so deciding, for example, one of the things that came up with was, just doing a package of tariffs on the United States. We've written about, there's $100 billion package of tariffs that's on the shelf that you could put in place on everything from planes to American whiskey, which would be bad in Tennessee and Kentucky. That wouldn't be enough. You got to go further. Maybe we should do antitrust investigations, and maybe we should, kick out the American tech companies. And there's a much more extreme way to do this. No agreement, and I think that's going to be the difficulty. And I picked that up in a lot of meetings.
So you're hearing that from the business side, David. I know you've been spending a lot of time talking to, country leaders, foreign ministers. What have you been picking up from on the political side?
Well, I think people are glad that there aren't any broken bones, but there's definitely a lot of bruising.
Actually, there are some broken bones,
Yeah.
including in our team.
Oh, indeed, there are.
Yeah,
Yes,
but our poor Catherine, she broke her
poor
wrist this
colleague over
morning.
here.
Yeah.
But the sort of rupture didn't happen. But I think it really has been a wake-up call. And obviously this has been building for a long time. Been building since Vice President Vance addressed the Munich Security Conference. And I think now, on a whole range of things, from AI to defense, the Europeans are aware that they're going to have to go it alone. The other thing that I picked up is that there's a sort of emergence of a new bloc. You just mentioned country blocs. So you have the European Union and you have NATO, and they're not quite all singing from the same song sheet. And then you have sort of Canada. There's this idea that Mark Carney is now the leader of Europe. And so there's this sort of
I thought that was Gavin Newsom. Yeah.
Gavin Newsom could be too. And so there's this emerging thing, and it's sort of a little bit of the EU plus the UK, but not all of the EU member states, and it's Canada. But it's basically this sense that kind of countries that are feeling under pressure from the US have to try to sort of band together in sort of ad hoc ways to kind of see off the threat.
So I want to talk a bit to both of you about the challenge for a publication like ours of covering something like Davos. But before I do that, I thought, David, obviously you're British, but you've lived in America for a long time. Amol, you're a good, solid American here. Do you think, how do we translate for an American audience, Amol, what's going on here in Davos?
It's billionaire winter camp. That's pretty much sums it up.
But they don't get to go skiing.
Yes, but they don't get to go skiing. No, I think the American audience looks at the optics. You're far away from it. You can see a lot of wealthy business leaders and world leaders gathering. So I think it's interesting for the president to come and pick this venue to do an affordability rollout.
Yeah.
It's something that was pointed out by numerous people this week and during the speech itself in real time by some of the executives I mentioned. So I think those are the kinds of things that the American audience pays a lot of attention to. But it is difficult, I think, to capture. And I'm interested. David has done this numerous times. So there's like a vibe here. It's almost a little bit of a. It reminds me of covering Congress when I did earlier in my career, where you just walk up and down a hallway, and it's a little bit like high school. You're gathering a vibe of what's going on, but it's hard to kind of reflect that perfectly. I don't know. In real time, we can ask David how to do that.
We're in the process, actually, of trying to shape a piece for the weekend that captures that vibe. But I'm not sure we've entirely settled yet.
No, we're still working on it, yeah.
No, but I mean, the thing is we have an embarrassment of riches. I mean, one of the great things about this meeting is that people let their guards down. This is one big conversation. Everybody's talking to everybody else. World leaders are talking to CEOs. and we're talking to them, and they sort of forget that we are journalists, and so
Be warned, everyone. Yeah.
and so the sort of, often when you meet these people, the circumstances are entirely different. If you're going into
I know they get to escape their flags, don't they?
Indeed,
Yeah.
and they get prepped. I mean, if you go in to see a big company, big CEO of a company, they will have spent an hour or two before you get there learning what not to say to you. But when you're here, the conversation continues, and you pick up all this stuff that you wouldn't pick up if you were kind of going to them or if they were coming to see us at the Wall Street Journal.
So have you both developed techniques of sort of staying to the bitter end at parties in order to get people when their guard is most down or they've had a few drinks?
I think that was it might have already been drinks before when I went to the JPM cocktail. It looked like people were in good spirits already, and so it was good. But there are also other one thing I've learned is that you have to have space for and maybe I'll keep this in mind next year, for the serendipitous. You see Ray Dalio in the Hilton Garden Inn, sitting there, or someone else that you want to just go and chat with, and you can here, and that is not normal, man. We don't just get that opportunity all the time. So that is, but when everybody's in 30-minute increments, it's tough.
There is, it seems to me as well, there's a bit of a sort of Hunger Games element to Davos as well. It's like, have you spoken to so-and-so? Did you, there's absolutely, everyone is jostling the whole time.
True.
And perhaps that was most on display when the president was talking and there was a sort of vicious security line outside. And I spoke to somebody who said, it was somebody I spoke to this morning who said he ended up standing next to 3 people who'd been trying to avoid him. He was a journalist. And he had them captured. So they had to speak to him. So... but David, you mentioned that there's an embarrassment of riches in Davos. That is true. That's both wonderful for us as a news publication, but it also poses challenges. So perhaps you could say a bit about how we filter the information we're getting and turn it into a coherent, useful information for our readers.
Well, the first thing is we're always in constant contact with each other. I mean, our Signal group chat has just been a sort of ragbag of, yes. Does anyone know where to get any food right now? Through to the big theme this week is China.
I just saw Scott Bassett walking down the promenade.
Indeed, yeah.
I think we could sell a subscription to our Signal chat.
Indeed, yeah.
Well, maybe we should invite Pete Hegseth onto it.
Yeah. Good idea.
But I still think we have work to do to sort of decide what we're going to write at the end of the week. We have a couple of dinners of our own once the dust settles.
Yes, there's still more to do.
Working dinners they will be, and we'll come up with a clever theme. Yeah.
One little bit of insider process stuff that I'll tell you is, because one thing we did is just opened a document, and we have some help in New York, and people have just been adding string and color, and I mean, it could be a colorful observation, something you witnessed at a party, or a serious theme that emerged on sovereign funds, and it's just this big thing of notes and interesting color that will eventually be shaped.
I'll tell you my favorite anecdote from the week is actually, I think it was my first or second meeting. I went down to Anthropic House, which is in Haberdashers. Like everybody, they have kitted the place out. It looks amazing. And the haberdasher, the Swiss haberdasher, came to pay them a visit. And he walked into his store and he was like, "This is amazing. It looks so much better than my store." Now, what normally happens at the end is all of the fixtures and fittings, they get ripped out, and they go on a skip, and you never ever see them again. And the haberdasher asked them, he said, "Could you leave it the way it is? I like it much better than my store." And Anthropic has said, yes, they're going to do it. They're going to remove their branding. But otherwise, he has got a completely free shop fitting.
Refurb.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a great story. Are we going to write it?
I think it might be in the weekend
A-head,
story.
automatic A-head assigned.
Yeah.
So when we have our wash up next week, then why don't each of you pitch what you think is a theme that we need to go back to based on the conversations you've been. I've got my own list, don't worry, but I'd like to hear what you think. I mean, Amol, what do you think? What's a story that you think we should do off the back of what you've learned here?
Well, one of the big financial stories that would have, I mean, a lot of things were drowned out by Greenland, but while we're in Davos, in real time, there's a pretty big fight in Washington happening over the future of crypto. And the players involved in that fight are all here. So the Coinbase CEO, Brian Armstrong, who sort of is at the center of it, for publicly speaking out against this legislation that was on the finish line, and now it's delayed. The banks, which are lobbying against this bill or have strong views about it, all their CEOs are here. The story of how that fight has played out and where it's going is both a theme and actually it's a story I think I just assigned before I got on stage.
Right.
So that is very much alive out of Davos. It's a sort of a Davos and Washington simultaneously
But
story.
this is also a good tee up to what you're doing next, right?
Perfectly, yes.
Perhaps
teeing up
you
next.
should tell.
Yeah, we'll have Jeremy Allaire, the CEO of Circle, here to talk about that and other topics. But it's very topical. This is what's this is playing out in real time, and people in the crypto industry aren't all exactly on the same page of what should happen now. And I'm told there are conversations with bank CEOs happening here about how to resolve and get past this. So in other words, there's like Greenland is happening here, and are we at trade war or war? But these other topics people are still discussing.
David, what are you
I
gonna be
think the sort of
pitching?
longer-term project that I would pitch is China. The Chinese delegation is actually sort of impressionistically, I'd have to go and look at the list to confirm it, but it seems to me to be smaller than in previous years or the years that I have been here. But it is on everybody's lips. Everybody is kind of like staggered at the pace of innovation in China. We had Albert Bourla, the chief executive of Pfizer, on this stage earlier this week, basically handicapping it at about 4 or 5 years before China is the same or ahead of America in pharmaceutical innovation. You have countries, basically in AI, they have two choices in Europe. They're not kind of making their own AI models. They can go American or they can go Chinese. And earlier this week, when it looked like Europe might have to get out its bazooka and shoot back at the US, there was this question about, can we shoot back at the US tech industry and with a bazooka and avoid AI? And there were genuine conversations going on about, well, does Europe have to build its AI on Chinese technology, which would have been sort of unthinkable some years ago. In fact, some countries, it's not so long since they were ripping Chinese, equipment out of their telecom systems and so on. So I think, although they're not here in large numbers, China is really dominating the meeting.
Absolutely. Well, both of those stories sound very interesting. So yes. I think everyone that's at Davos this year feels that this is a consequential Davos. The world order is shifting. But as is so often the case with these big momentous events, the real story doesn't emerge until later. So I wonder whether you both think when in a year, 10 years, 20 years, we look back on Davos 2026, what do you think? This is quite a difficult question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What do you think will be the thing that people point to or say this was why it was significant?
I mean, I think it will be, if not the event, one of the staging posts on sort of Europe waking up and realizing that the relationship with America is fundamentally changed and it's probably not going back to the way that it was. And whether it's this Davos or not, it's definitely going to be a really important event on that timeline.
And I would say from the market side, I'm not going to speak to what the markets will do tomorrow, much less in 10 years. But I will say that I think in addition to the Europe, David's great point, one investor mentioned to me, thought this was a really interesting way of looking at it, that we're at the end of a basically 4-decade consensus that globalization is just inherently good. The default should be low tariffs or no tariffs. The default should be no borders, and Trump has completely turned that on its head. And this Davos is sort of like cementing that. And so there are implications in business and everyone's economies. For the markets, I think the takeaway I have is that every time, it takes a lot now for Trump to rattle the markets, right? But he did with what he did here. And one wonders if he has to do more and more, because when he does rattle the markets, that's almost when everyone panics and the deal happens. It seems to be part of the process. I'm not saying that they're doing it on purpose. I'm just saying I'm watching it, and it takes a lot. And you wonder, it will take even more the next time, and even more. So I do wonder if turns out to be a lot of instability in U.S. markets, if this also will have been a pivotal moment. That might not be in 10 years. That could be in 6 months.
Yeah. So I'm going to shortly open this up to questions in case you've all got things you've always wanted to ask a Wall Street Journal journalist. But before I do that, I've got some sort of quick-fire questions for both of you. I'd like to know from each of you, which was the most interesting conversation you had while you were here?
You want to go?
I can't say the name of the person, but it's a billionaire who terrified me with his assessment of the pace of change in AI, and all of my timelines were far longer than he laid out. And he was kind of basically quizzing me, sort of saying, like, so what are the things you do in your job? What are the things you do on the day-to-day? And I sort of started going through them, and it was like, AI can do it, AI can do it, AI can do it. And then we ended up with a very small amount of things that AI couldn't do, and I got very, very worried.
Great. Kind of. Amol?
Well, similarly, there were quite a number of there's some I can't say that were particularly interesting, but I would say among the on the record ones, David Rubenstein from Carlyle. We had a very interesting conversation, partly because for me, you know, my media background,
yes.
so we were able to talk about Greenland, and he had a very interesting thesis that while there's a national security angle to this, that at least as much of a driver, if not more, is the rare earths and resources and the potential profit and from extracting it, and who wins and how will that be divvied up and which companies will be formed to do that. I wasn't thinking about that, so that was really interesting. And we were talking. He's the owner of the Baltimore Orioles, and I was able to ask him about sports media.
So it's interesting on the Greenland resources thing, because resources was part of the conversation at the beginning. Then it completely disappeared,
Right.
and it's all
Right.
about national security.
Yes.
And then I had Chris Wright on stage here this morning, the Energy Secretary, and he was sort of really downplaying the importance of resources in the green thing, which, you know, makes you then wonder.
I think we need to watch that. Yeah.
Are they very important? Yeah.
Who was the person you most wanted to try to speak to but failed to get in front of?
Given this crypto war, Brian Armstrong, if you're here, I'm still here. I'll be available this evening. I'd probably put in a few bank CEOs, but probably I'll put Brian at the top.
I suppose the arrival of Musk at the very last minute. He's somebody I've never met, would like to meet. And,
you know where to find him.
Yeah, maybe I'll go and doorstop him after this. I imagine he has a few security guards with him
Indeed.
himself. Yeah.
Okay, best party? Apart from our own, obviously.
The JPM cocktail, I think, was it. By the way, it was also, there's only one other time I've ever seen a CEO have like a head of state handshake line, which was at a Ambani wedding in India. So it was very interesting.
Did you get the photo?
I didn't. I saw a lot of there were a lot of people lining up, but it was kind of like a presidential rope line, so it was interesting.
I'm going to say Scaramucci's wine party, simply because I waited for 2 hours in line to get into it. And it was one of the most frustrating experiences ever. So the wine party used to be in town in an old hotel up in a piano barn, and now it's right up in the north of town in a sort of purpose-built event space. But the big difference is that, you know, the great leveler in this town was that everybody had to wait in line. Not at this party. So there was the line that I was in, and then there was the line that SUVs kept on pulling up beside, and people would get out. And anyway, got in there. Very good wine, very good set of people.
Worth the wait.
Worth the wait.
Good. Okay, final one. Funniest moment.
For me, it was, there's another cast of colorful characters that's here that's neither us nor the executives doing deals or billionaires. It's like these other vendors and people who are here to do other things. So there's the performers for the CEOs. So there was one guy was coming through the security machine, and he had bottles in his bag, and the security guy said, you can't have, why do you have these bottles? Why are there these empty bottles? And he said, sir, it's for my juggling show. So I said, okay. And then today I found out there was a mentalist who was what they called somebody who was going around and I guess doing performances for, like, you know, predict your passcode or something, and other tricks for the CEO. So that was another
The Davos
level
entourage.
level of Davos. Yeah.
I'm probably going to get in trouble for telling this one, but hey ho. I ended up in a cat and mouse game with the Swiss security in the Trump speech because I didn't get there in time to get a seat. And so.
Actually, be
Okay, I'll be
he
honest.
did,
I
and
did.
he gave it up
I gave
for
it up
me.
to Emma.
man.
Good lad.
Yeah. I know what side my bread is buttered on. Yeah. Anyway, I was without a seat, and they were trying to clear the room of everybody that was standing. And this guy had decided, this Swiss security guy had decided that he was going to get me out if it was the last thing he did. And every time he tried to move me, I moved to another bit of the room. And then I realized eventually that he recognized me. He clocked me and he was after me. And also I realized that every time I saw him, my face became this sort of picture of terror. And I thought, how do I stop this from happening? So I took my glasses off. And that solved the problem because he didn't recognize me without my glasses. And I can't see anything without them on. And so I couldn't see him coming. And then I managed to stay for the whole speech.
Which was very good news. How do you evade security, Swiss style?
Grit and hustle here at the Wall Street Journal, my friends.
Right, has anybody got a question they're dying to ask over here? It was here, yeah.
I work in cybersecurity, and what fascinates me is there's some rumors, and it's been posted on Fortune, Yahoo Finance. And if you do a correlation to this, you might figure out that the abduction of Maduro happened to get the private keys to the Bitcoin that Venezuela reportedly have over 600,000 Bitcoins, today worth 70 billion. Have you done any investigations on that?
We have quite a bit of reporting going on what happened to the proceeds. We've written about the fact that there was Tether, the cryptocurrency, was Maduro basically received in the oil settlements. What happens after that is a big chase, and there's quite a bit of reporting. I have nothing to reveal here. There's great reporters on it in our investigative team, but it is a good question. It's a good question.
Here, this lady.
So in most of the sessions that I work in tech, so it's been mostly around AI. There's a high level of optimism, and the topics covered trust, safety, governance, human-centered AI, et cetera. And yet the public distrust is very high. So I've heard numbers in the 70-some% or 80-some%, depending on where you are in the world. What do you think is happening? Are we in an echo chamber here? I mean, what's attributing to the gap between what we're hearing here and what the public is saying?
Well, I can say something on that. I think there is a realization, or rather a dawning on some of the chief execs I've spoken to, and certainly the political leaders, that they're not paying enough attention to this. And I think you might see this year that this very question, that AI starts to become much more political, because people are going to be worried about the impact that it has on jobs. They're worried about energy prices, the impact it's having on energy. They're worried about safety. So I think there is a sort of growing realization that they can't just, it's all very well saying, AI, and, the need to innovate and sort of stay ahead and beat China. But at some point, you do have to think about the impact it's going to have on society, or you'll pay a price for that. That's certainly something that I've picked up.
I mean, I completely agree that the meetings that have been the most positive, the most rah-rah that I've had have all been with AI companies. And it's a real kind of difference between the AI companies and everybody else. I agree that it's going to become a lot more political. But one thing I do think that countries are also, they too see sort of productivity gains and so on for delivering public services. And especially in Europe, where they're having to ramp up defense spending, growth is low, there's no clear answers, the bond markets are at the door. I think they think AI might be a way of delivering public services very, very cheaply.
Okay, we've got another question here.
So much. I actually wanted to ask a follow-up question to that one, which is about the role of AI in media, and also specifically in Wall Street Journal. So, in watching some of the presentations in the main forum, I kept longing for a real-time fact checker to kind of pop up. I also was thinking about how I consume news now. It's a lot of the onus is on me to check multiple sources. I've built my own prompt for my AI tech stack that allows me now to kind of fact check and see just the facts, ma'am, followed by different perspectives. But do you see the media doing something like that in the future, where it's, really, really unbiased facts could start a piece, followed by perspectives, that have a sense of, if you will, right or left, followed by a deep dive analysis around all of the news that's coming our way? Because it's very complex to navigate as a news consumer.
Yes, it is, and I think there's a huge opportunity for us here. But we're absolutely not in denial about AI at all. In fact, we're looking for ways that AI can make our journalism better, and whether that's to do, to use it more effectively to fact check, to sort of check for bias even, or whether it's simply to sort of use it like an extra newsroom, because there's so much that AI can do that we can then feed into our journalism. We can also use it to make the reading experience or the interface experience with our readers, better and more sort of, people will be able to choose how they want to get their news, when they want to get it, in what format. But these are all big challenges for us. We have a team in the newsroom that's experimenting around that.
I can add one thing on that. AI is good at different things and not as good at other things in the newsroom context. And I'm not speaking for the whole newsroom or the Journal, but for example, when the president put out his financial disclosure form, I uploaded it into Notebook LM, this Google Gemini technology, and in about 4 seconds it summarized it, and handwriting and all kinds of messy stuff, right? But then I went and physically checked each page before so I was the fact checker of the AI, not in reverse. And I think we're not yet at the point, in my personal view, again, I'm not speaking for the company, but you'd need small language models where the data is pristine for us to trust it as a fact checker. Right now, it's based on, common crawl internet data, and it hallucinates sometimes. And I mean, we are just better at the moment at the fact checking. So I think that's where I come down on it. Yeah.
Okay, we've got one more question over here.
Thank you. This is my third Davos, and it was the first under Larry Fink. And I think from the relevance point of view, he did a great job, because it's record numbers all over the CEOs and leadership, political leaderships. Nevertheless, this I think it was yesterday, there was this news that he might create other Davos, bring it to Buenos Aires or Jakarta. And it got me thinking, it's maybe a very progressive thinking, addressing all the critics, that this is a very inaccessible place, very exclusive. But on the other hand, do you think Davos will still be Davos if it's not in Davos?
Well, they did once have Davos in May, right, after the pandemic, and apparently there was a lot of very positive feedback about Davos in May as opposed to Davos in January. I think it's a great idea. I mean, why not? I mean, count me in for Buenos Aires and Jakarta. I'll be there. But no, I think it has been an exceptionally interesting Davos. I think Larry Fink's done an incredible job getting unbelievably high-profile people here. But I think there are enough interesting CEOs, business people, and government leaders in the world for us to be able to, for Davos to be able to extend its reach. And it would probably be good. I mean, we need to hear from other parts of the world.
But I think it will be as well as rather than instead of.
Yeah, instead of. Yeah.
Because, I mean, one thing that is true of every Davos I've ever been to is everyone predicts that this will be the last Davos.
Yes.
And it
Funny
never
enough,
happens.
they're not saying that this year. I mean, you're right, every year it's like, Davos is a talking of CEOs. It's over, Davos man is dead. But
You're right, I haven't
they
heard
haven't
of this
said
year.
it this year.
Yeah, maybe it's because it's been such a roaring success.
Yeah.